the dust has settled, and now we should know at least one player that we're trying to leave our draft with the values, the players we're targeting as we look forward to the fantasy football season. That more to speak on the couch. Alfredo Brown, who's one player that you're not going to leave your draft without, as in mid-May now, we know what we're looking at.
The one player that I do not want to leave my draft without, Jonathon Brooks, running back for the Carolina Panthers. And I think that a lot of the steam is already starting to, gather as people are getting really excited about rookie camps. And you get these, quotes from Dave Canales saying our offense is going to be about running the football. And, oftentimes where there's, not to convert from steam to smoke, where there's steam, there's actual fire. And like that is probably what Dave Canales really wants to do, is run the football. And we look at the offenses he's been a part of in the past, whether he's been offensive coordinator or quarterbacks coach. Rashad White last year, tons of volume. Before that, Kenneth Walker as a rookie over in Seattle. This is a team that, man, the fact that they traded up to go get Jonathon Brooks as the first running back as early as they did, to me, that speaks volumes about what they want to do with him. They want to use him out in space, pass the ball to him, get the ball out of Bryce Young's hands quick. I absolutely love the value that you're seeing there. He's already getting steamed up a little bit in these underdog drafts where he's going around running back 25. I think in home league drafts, he might go a little bit later. But I mean, this is a guy who, we could see as a rookie running back, especially later on in the season, looking like a top 12, top 15 running back, no problem.
Yeah. Oh, he's got the ability. No doubt about it.
Yeah.
I suppose if there's any hesitation with Brooks, it's just that he's coming back from an ACL tear. But, Breece Hall last year showed us, hey, if he's good enough, it doesn't matter, especially if you have those young recuperative skills that we don't have anymore, Alfredo. You definitely, Brooks speaks to the task right now. As again, the idea here is like, okay, we can look over the landscape of fantasy football and start to dig in a little bit and understand where we think sweet spots are, sweet offenses, or otherwise where we're in disagreement with the consensus, and you're starting now to have the rudiments of a strategy. And your mid-round running back, I don't care if you take running back, you take your first running back in the first round, third round, fifth round, you better have running backs in the seventh, eighth, ninth round. Well, like you said with Brooks, maybe sixth round, but it doesn't matter. If they hit, it doesn't matter. The year that Josh Jacobs fell to the fifth or sixth round, it doesn't matter if you took him in the fifth or fourth. If you reached for Josh Jacobs in the fourth, you still hit a home run. So reaching for Jonathon Brooks in the fourth could be a home run if he gets that kind of volume like you mentioned. And I think that it's important to point out the interconnectedness here of Dave Canales and what Tampa did. And maybe just like the idea of if he's adding to Carolina's offense, is Tampa going to lose anything with him? We'll see. But even when the Panthers offense was struggling, Alfredo, they could run the ball, right? Like Chuba Hubbard was still running the ball like semi-effectively, and he's Chuba Hubbard. So I love that. The idea of Brooks, I would say in that range for me, and Alfredo, this is where I get into it is, the couch. I'm in the point of my Steelers fandom arc where I want to believe. I'm open. My heart is open to better things happening. So I'm picturing the best case scenario. George Pickens, Justin Fields, and Jaylen Warren. I think Jaylen Warren would probably be like around the same point in the draft that you're thinking about Brooks. I'm thinking about Jaylen Warren. I said, the schedule. We talked schedule. I forgot that's today too. Dating our recording here. Yeah.
Finally.
I saw that Pittsburgh's going to open with Atlanta. Ooh, Arthur Smith revenge game. And so there, you look at that running back landscape, and certainly you should have a few favorites. Everybody is going to have different favorites. That's what makes this fun, right? Looking in that range, Aaron Jones. Ooh, that's Zamir White. Rhamondre Stevenson. Why is Rhamondre Stevenson? Let me ask this. I'm going to write an article this week. ADPs that don't make sense. And I'm looking back at last year's ADPs, Alfredo. And Rhamondre Stevenson was like a third round pick, even with Zeke there. Fourth round pick last year. And now he's a seventh round pick this year. Help me make sense out of that.
Listen, I think that everyone is a little scared of what happened last year. It's kind of like the Kyle Pitts effect. Is you went and you drafted him, you had the expectations, it didn't meet expectations. Well, there's no way he could possibly meet expectations in the next year. That's just not going to. And people don't want to get burned. And so
Mhm.
that's really what it is. I do think there are some smart people that are looking too at the Patriots offense and saying, I don't know how good they're going to be. I don't know how many scoring opportunities they're going to be. This is a guy who's going to need to get a lot of touches, but that's
Mhm.
also very possible. Alex Van Pelt is the new offensive coordinator
Yeah.
there, and he was the coordinator running that Browns rushing attack where, Nick Chubb was getting plenty of touches. Jerome Ford, when he got his chance, he got plenty of touches. So it can very easily happen. I mean, there is absolutely a world where Rhamondre Stevenson is back to being on the cusp of, an RB1 in that
Right?
top 12 area. So, I mean, that's the kind of guy that I want to take chances on. Those guys that can absolutely outperform their ADP in that area, Sig, that you've mentioned
Yeah.
with Rhamondre Stevenson, Zamir White,
Mhm.
Jonathon Brooks, Jalen Warren, James Conner to an extent. Like, these are a bunch of these
Sure.
guys that are absolute values that can crush at their given price. And with the way that fantasy drafts are already stacking up
Yeah.
early, I love grabbing these wide receivers early because the wide receiver, oddly enough, dries up quick, whereas running back seems deeper than ever now. And we have so many people in committees. It's just
Mhm.
adjust your cost, adjust your values a little bit with how many committees there are.
Yeah, and we're talking about underdog, so you got best ball action,
Mhm.
so that makes it even easier. That makes it even easier to do a shotgun approach, and like you said, and I mean, let's really just hammer this. It's May, we can start talking about these things. I mean, I'm just gonna read off in the underdog ADP, starting at, pick 70 the 71, 71st ranked player, 72.4 ADP. So we're talking about a late 6th, early 7th round pick, Aaron Jones. Yes, check. David Montgomery, I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
7th round, David Montgomery. You're attached to the Detroit offense. He can give you a 3 touchdown game in any given game. Rhamondre Stevenson, Zamir White, DeAndre Swift. Yeah, yes, DeAndre Swift. I mean, it's Chicago's offense. They went out and paid for him. Even if he just gets the opportunity he got last year with Philadelphia, he doesn't have Jalen Hurts vulturing touchdowns. What does that look like for fantasy? I want that. No, Najee Harris, okay, whatever. Tony Pollard. Well, I mean, you could take a stance on.
Did we strike a chord there with
Well,
Najee?
because it's Warren over Harris. Because for
Okay.
some reason, Warren's going after Harris. Like, I'm going to pull a Cecil Lammey and say, "Do you watch football?" Like, I don't know how you could possibly take Harris ahead of Warren, but I guess the consensus is right now. So, and then Brooks, Connor, and again the veterans, right? Connor, Moss, Mostert. And that was that like 10 running backs in a row where I would take every single
Yeah.
one of them at ADP. So
Yeah.
now we have the beginning of a strategy. You're going to take running back in the 7th or 8th round. I mean, 7th and 8th round, probably the 9th round too. And then, like you said, that gravitates you to wide receivers early. Maybe you take your favorite tight end in the 4th, 5th round.
And there's a guy just underneath that group
Uh huh.
right now in ADP at running back 31, Javonte Williams, that I'm so curious about because this is a guy that not too long ago we were looking at him as being a top 10 redraft running back, a
Uh huh.
top 5 dynasty running back. One injury and one coach has changed that. And even early in the season last year, he was catching plenty of passes from Russell Wilson.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
is an offense that passes to the running back, and Bo Nix passes to the running back a lot. I'm going to be very curious to watch how Cecil continues to report on this throughout the offseason.
Totally. Well, it touches on a couple of things. One that you already mentioned is this idea of like, emotional aversion to taking a player after the player burns people, right? So, like in 1% of the fantasy football population, there's people that are like, because I associate Rhamondre Stevenson, Javante Williams, Kyle Pitts with pain. And
Right.
then others are watching it and saying, well, and maybe those of us that were considering those players almost like, I dodged a bullet. I didn't end up taking Kyle Pitts. So for some significant percentage of people, you have a negative association, but does then that create a buying opportunity?
Yeah.
Because that is dragging down the ADP. And that could be for Javante Williams. And I think that if you're on the pro glass half full side, you'd say, well, this will be second year removed from ACL. We got ACL tears looming in this conversation because he didn't look like pre-injury Williams last year. But you can say, well, it's asking a lot. It was reported as an ACL plus, but and this is where, of course, in Cecil we trust when it comes to things Broncos. Um, couldn't Audric Estime just be like a better version of Williams if Williams doesn't return to. So I think it's almost like an either or. So Alfredo, that's an exercise I'm always doing in my head right now. Is like an either or, where you can look at players and I can say to you, how do you feel about this player ADP? If you say anti, nah, I wouldn't. I'm not touching it. That player 10-foot pole range. Then there's another player that you should be targeting. Like if you really believe that, then the converse of that. So I think like you should either be saying, no, Williams is fine, and you're targeting
Mhm.
Williams, or if you're like, nah, I think that his time has passed. We've seen as good as he's going to be in the NFL. Then you should be targeting Estime. I kind of look like Likely and Andrews like that, where there's these either or propositions, and rookie running backs are going to figure big into this stuff for sure. Okay, let me go back to something I touched on, but I can sit down for a second. Do
Yeah.
you care about the schedule? Do you I mean, is it
Mm.
something? Is it for fantasy football? As we're talking to our audience, should they care?
I think we really want to care. I think that's what it is. Like truly, we want to care. We get excited for these big matchups. I think some of them matter. Some of them matter. Seeing, okay, we've got some guaranteed fireworks early on with Ravens versus Chiefs. With I think it was Bengals Chiefs.
Mhm,
It's going to be a tough opening for the Chiefs, by the way, but that should mean plenty of offense. I, you know, I don't try to put too much stock into the schedule early because we have no idea
right.
how good or bad these teams are going to be. Last year, we would have said, oh, thank God, my team's playing against the Texans. Cakewalk, easy. And the Texans were not at all what we expected. So I try not to get too excited about the schedule, but I think that for some of those early games, you just know, hey, I was on the fence about drafting a guy like maybe Xavier Worthy or Marquise
Hmm.
Brown,
Hmm.
and now I know I'm just maybe looking into the future here. We have no idea. There's no reports, but now there's reports of Rashee Rice being suspended,
Hmm.
and these guys can come out early in some big games, give me value. I know I have some good starters there that are going to be in some big games. I think that's about the extent I would go with it when trying to value the schedule.
Yeah, and Kansas City wide receiver is another one of those. You just touched on another one. Like you should be in on one of Worthy, Brown, or Rice. I mean, you can make your
Yeah.
case. One of those three guys is going to be making people very happy. Uh, I would imagine. And even your stance on Kansas City, it was kind of funny to see Marcus Valdez Scantling sign with Buffalo, right? Like, oh, we got Xavier Worthy. Yeah, we got Marcus Valdez Scantling. We think that he's, I don't know. But
It feels like
certainly,
every team just got the same thing that they've had before, or they got the same thing that they already had at home. They just got to
hmm
discount Gabe Davis again in Buffalo.
yeah, I think that we're to that stage of free agency where not much happening is going to be that consequential when we see some of these veterans that have made it to the third stage of free agency. But I do think that the schedule, to bring back to the schedule really quick, um, the exercise I do, Alfredo, is I mean, look, like we've watched a lot of football at this point, too much football. And perhaps on our deathbed, it may be something we reflect on. Uh, but because of that, we have like in our brain, and I just read something really good about how the brain is not a computer. From scientific philosophical standpoint, the brain's not a computer. But yet I'm limited by my existence and experience, and I think of so many things in terms of pop culture or video games or experiences I've had with computers. And I feel like in our brains, because we watch so much football, Alfredo, you could say like, oh, okay, Kansas City and Baltimore are going to play the opening Thursday night, and you can run a little simulation. Like your brain can just like you can hit like go, like enter, and you're like, how's that going to go? And your brain's going to create something, and like you said, we're going to adjust. Now, once we actually see the football, we're going to adjust, and once we even hear about stuff out of training camp, even OTAs, we might adjust. But you're always going to have that mental picture of like how would it look or what's the range of possibilities when these two teams get together, and you can pick out a few schedules where you say this team could get off to a hot start. You know, this team, and confidence is such a big deal in the NFL, and momentum. When things are clicking, like what happened to the Dallas offense in the second half of the year for a while, um, and you can see those runways, and then you could also see like minefields where like, oof, that's some tough defenses, or like, for instance, like New England. Rhamondre Stevenson is an example, like Drake May, right? Like if New England faces, oh, I don't know, like Pittsburgh, Baltimore, Kansas City, or something like that to open the season, you're saying, ooh, Drake May might be starting to be putting his head back in his shell a little bit soon. But if he starts out with defenses, like the Jets defense, be another good example, divisional matchup, But if he starts out with defenses that are a little more of a pushover, we're not as afraid of, well, maybe you might see him build momentum. So I'd look for stuff like that. But I think you hit on the most important point. Like, we don't really know that much. And I just I want to be ready to adjust as soon as we do know. And mostly the schedule release stuff is mostly about like the hold and the sway NFL has over us, as like you and I sitting here as part of that whole picture, Alfredo.
Well, now they're on Netflix. Now we have another stream. Not that we don't already all have these streaming services, but we have to subscribe to now 6 different streaming services and different Sunday tickets and Red Zone and all these different things just to watch the games. It's getting nuts.
Okay, look, you've opened the door. Okay,
I figured I was.
like your honor. Whatever. Since you brought this up, it's the off season. Like, it's time. Let's talk about what's on people's minds right now, and this is definitely on people's minds. Okay, um, and I do think I'm going to be like the in this time when civil disobedience is also on our minds. I'm going to break rank and say, like, I'm going to look into the camera. I always forget to look into the camera. Hi, everybody. I love you all. Um, it's okay to not watch a football game. It's okay. And it's okay to not subscribe to Netflix. And I get it. I think that the numbers, it's reported on IndieWire, I think, that like 71% of the people that signed up for Peacock to watch a playoff game, now granted, playoff game, a little more consequential, uh, remain subscribers a month after, which was surprising
Ooh,
to me. It was
yeah.
really surprising. So you understand why that, you know, but look, and as this continues, like, it will beget, like, they'll continue to chop it up into smaller and smaller pieces as long as it continues to be, well, at least in the short term, a winning proposition, right? Short term growth valued over all things these days. Again, there's a whole conversation there. And it's the games on Christmas too. The games on Christmas, and I took this
Oh,
stance.
that's the Christmas game?
I believe that it's the Christmas games. I
Ah.
mean, correct me. I mean, my brain is like switch talk about old
I
man brain
mean,
fog.
nothing
I
says Christmas like gathering around the Netflix with the family.
Well, and yeah, it is. It's the Christmas Day games. I'm verifying it. And that's where, and I don't think I know if I've said this on the show, but I'm saying it right now, that I feel like the right response is to say, and I know there are buys in week 14, but play your league championship in week 16. So there's no fantasy football in your league. If you're the commissioner, if you're a group, and Christmas can be Christmas, uh, because that's real estate that has been left aside. Now, yeah, football has always been part of Thanksgiving, but football's not on in the background in your childhood memories of Christmas. Unless it's a blue gray game.
I kinda like that. I kinda like that suggestion, Sig. I'm not even gonna lie. I kinda like that. I remember last year, I was at a church service with my wife and her family, and the kids singing and the whole beautiful, nativity scene thing going on, and then she just catches me looking down, and I am watching the Dolphins-Bills game that's going on at that
Hmm.
moment, or the Dolphins-Cowboys game going on at that moment, and that was the comeback for the Dolphins, and
Hmm.
it's so funny to see how much this little game just absolutely takes over our lives on these moments like you're saying, let Christmas be Christmas, let
Yeah,
let the
yeah,
holidays be the holidays, let that season end maybe a week earlier.
yeah. Well, anyway, I know I'm soft in my old age. I mean, I was soft in
No,
my
you're
young
fine.
age
I'm
too.
with you. I'm with you
Uh,
100%.
so that's one of the things that this whole this headline grabbing thing that's happening right now. And I mean, I do think that in some ways this represents that. I mean, look, uh here we go. It's like an off season on the couch, so we're kind of off the rails anyway. But there is a it feels like to me, Alfredo, as an old man shouting, shaking fist at cloud, that the business model is almost addiction. Like, it's trying
Yes.
to create addicts everywhere we look. And in some ways, we are, my father, may he rest in peace, he was a compulsive gambler, uh, and successfully, through Gamblers Anonymous. I went to some meetings with him when I was a teenager, and I understand, like, addictive personality. Again, it's all kinds of conversations here, but that this, and of course, subtext becomes the text when like the NFL and gambling are very tied together now, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I think that, hey, we're here talking about fantasy football, and fantasy football is a form of gambling, but because it takes 4 months, so it doesn't have instant gratification. And really, it's about people. And it's almost like pushing back and saying, like, there are still some things that should be about people, even though the escapism of fantasy football is a balm or a tonic for our souls in some ways. Hopefully it's not at the expense of other things that should be hopefully a balm or a tonic for your soul. And I think it football guys in particular, it's one of the things that we talked about this before we went on the air, like behind the scenes, um, the and I think I hope this is apparent, like above in front of the camera or microphone too, that like we love each other, you know, we love each other. There's a lot of conversations with people I work with, football guys, that include like I love you, like sincerely, like, and that still is at the core or kernel of what we're trying to make here, and not lose that in the pursuit of whatever is happening right now. So,
Right.
uh, and at the same time, at the same time, I my part of my brain, a thread in my brain is like thinking about these ADPs and thinking about this, and it is time. There is a way that this is where like this is the part of the calendar where you get the drop, right? Because this stuff's going to get corrected. You know, people are going to catch up, and I think that that's one of the fun parts of this right now. To bring it back to the present, is there anything you want to say as I got grandiose and grandiloquent in my speech, Alfredo?
No, I mean it's there's so much for the fantasy football thing. I think that you're 100% right. The fantasy football streaming, all these different products and services that we're getting have been like they lead to addiction. I mean, just look at what social media is there for. It's there for addiction. It's
Hmm.
quick 10 seconds, 30 seconds, go to the next and keep going, keep going, keep going. Um, as long as we don't forget the original thing that brought us, to these sports and to fantasy football, and that's the human element of it. Getting together for your local draft, right? That's why it's such a big thing here at Football Guys of draft
Hmm.
local, and we promise that to our people here, and we put that at the forefront. So I mean, that's just kind of one of those things that I'm trying to remember. It's gotten very easy for us just to
Yeah.
draft in our apps and do it from home, and the Zoom generation that we're on now. But yeah, go back to the way it was, and allow us to cultivate these relationships that we have that come through fantasy football. And that's been a big thing that I've been able to see here with Football Guys. The relationships that we have made with our audience members. They see us
Mhm.
on a camera, they hear us in a microphone or in their headphones. But I think it goes beyond that. And to be able to respond to them in the comments, interact with them on Twitter, that's just been one of the coolest things.
Yeah, well, because we are of that group of people. That's it. I mean, we belong to the group of people that we serve, and whatever that means in terms of prominence or how big or how much the company's worth or how much money we make, I don't want to exceed that in the pursuit of that. I don't want to lose that connection and that sense of being of the people that we serve. And it's good, it's fun, and we keep it fun. Uh, and again, like what's fun is the drop, getting the drop in the shark pool, where the sharks in the water. And I think there's definitely stuff happening out there right now that you can look at. We were just talking about um, running backs. I want to ask you
Mhm.
about tight ends, because I do think there's this really interesting opportunity with tight end this year. Like this could be a year for early tight end, because and part of that, Alfredo, is that early tight end is the cheapest it's been ever that I can remember. Like tight end one is a third round pick, and you don't have, and obviously you're not
Yeah.
going to break the seal. I mean, Sam Laporta could take another step, and I'm endorsing buying the Detroit offense. Period. I mean that's easy. That's a layup. Um, but after that, again, if you're thinking this stuff through, fourth round pick Travis Kelce. I'm looking at underdog ADPs. Fourth round pick Trey McBride. Fifth round pick Dalton Kincaid. Fifth round pick Mark Andrews. And fifth, sixth round pick Kyle Pitts, right? I feel like one out of those 5 should appeal to you, at least one, depending on what you value, depending on what matters to you, depending on your beliefs about each one of these players and offenses. One of those guys should stand out as a high probability top 3 tight end and therefore a good proposition. Do any one of them stand out to you, Alfredo?
I mean, I think we kind of already know what Travis Kelce is, and Dave and I recently talked about this. We have him as tight end 1 still. I mean, there's not really a reason to back off from him now. I'm slightly worried about Sam Laporta and potential touchdown regression. I still love the Lions offense, but it is it's not as unquestioned that he's this tight end 1 that a lot of people have him at. For the guys that I like, it's that next tier. I love Trey McBride. I think that Trey McBride has an absolute opportunity to break out even further this year. We've seen throughout his career that Kyler Murray loves the tight end. He did that with Zach Ertz when he was there. And we've seen that Kyler can still spread the ball around even with a top wide receiver. When DeAndre Hopkins and Zach Ertz were still in the field, the two of them were getting their share of the target. So this is not something where all of a sudden Marvin Harrison Jr. comes in and Trey McBride is gone. And that offense should be a lot better with Kyler not being as hurt. The guys that I really like, though, if I'm going for the values, normally we say stay away from this area. These, like the middle of the road tight ends. It's either, great or late, go early or pick them up later. I'm still enamored with these guys, Dalton Kincaid and Kyle Pitts, and where we're able to get them. If that Falcons offense is able to utilize their weapons like we've all wanted for years, with Kirk Cousins being there and Dalton Kincaid, this is the crazy thing to me is that in the final, I wrote it here, in the final 10 weeks with Dalton Kincaid, let me double check this. I want to make sure I have
Mhm,
the exact right thing. Final
mhm.
11 week, excuse me, Dalton Kincaid had the exact same numbers per game, all the metrics, the fun metrics that people love, as Sam Laporta. They both averaged 5 receptions per game, 51 yards per game. Their first read target rates were nearly identical and actually in favor of Dalton Kincaid. The big difference between them was touchdown variance, 2 for Kincaid, 7 for Laporta. If that flips around, all of a sudden we're talking about how Dalton Kincaid should be the tight end
Sure,
1 or tight
sure.
end 2 amongst this class. And with what has changed in Buffalo, no Stephon Diggs, I would not be surprised if we see Dalton Kincaid be that target 1 for Josh Allen in Buffalo.
Yeah, that's a good question, right? I think of all these things in terms of questions, and for each person listening, I mean, if you're listening to me and Alfredo right now in May, then you care about fantasy football, then you should at least have some stance, right? Like, who's going to be the number one target for Josh Allen with Stephon Diggs gone? You should have some stance on that. It's actionable and it's pretty easy. And I think potential answers are Kincaid, um, Keon Coleman. We'll be watching camp reports closely. The one that appeals to me, while we're just on the subject of the Buffalo offense, would be James Cook. I think James Cook. This is another one of those. Alfredo, look at the ADP. I said, don't make no sense. But it's like a late 4th round pick, and Joe Brady, right? It's Joe Brady offense now, right?
Mhm.
And I think one of the essential questions also you have to look at with Buffalo is you have like 2 different streams of data when you look. You have like the Ken Dorsey offense and the Joe Brady offense, and I mean, it's what's going to happen in 2024 is going to resemble that second half more than that first half. And I think there's a stretch, maybe over like the last 5 games, where James Cook was like running back 4 or something like that. You know,
I mean,
he was
he was
starting
getting
to
targeted a
have
ton towards the end of the year.
right, right, and another thing that I get stuck on when I look at Buffalo's offense is Josh Allen had 15 rushing touchdowns last year. Like, is that going to happen again? And it implicates a couple of things. Is if it doesn't, then Josh Allen and how that masked his passing numbers dropping off in the second half of the year, that's going to become important. I mean, why would you take Josh Allen? Honestly, I mean, it's hard for me to imagine looking over the quarterback landscape saying the best option is to take Josh Allen as quarterback 1. But anyway, but James Cook, I feel like Alfredo could easily, like, the season could start 2-3 games in, we could say James Cook should have been a first, second round pick. He should have been a top 20 pick. I feel like that's very much in the range of outcomes.
I mean, I'm looking at it right now of how he was performing, and immediately after Damian Harris went down, Cook was running back 12, running back 18, running back 13. he had a few off weeks, and then he's running back 8. So we see that there's a ceiling there. And it was really when he got that 4-game stretch when Joe Brady became the offensive coordinator, and it was cut in half by a bye week. He was running back 10, running back 12, but then running back 3 and running back 2. And those games were without him. He only had one rushing touchdown in that span. Where he was getting his work was in the receiving game. He had receiving touchdowns in each of those games. He was getting targeted. He got 8 catches across those 2 games. I mean, that's a very realistic thing that could happen for James Cook this year with really there's no Stephon Diggs there, and there's not
Yeah.
a proven pass catcher that we know. If you're asking the question, who's going to be the top pass catcher for Josh Allen, we don't know. Now, I'm not all the way in on James Cook
Mhm.
being this guy that we need to take super early. I don't mind the price tag. I think it's fine. I do think that he is a value where he's currently at. Now, I'm a little bit of a lover of Ray Davis.
Okay.
And I do think that Ray Davis is going to have himself a really nice opportunity to do what the Bills have wanted to do, which is why they brought in Latavius Murray after Damian Harris got hurt, why they brought in Leonard Fournette. Is they have wanted some sort of a big bruising running back that can take those goal line touches away from Josh Allen, that can do the things that James Cook can't. So I try to keep that in the back of my mind when I'm drafting James Cook. I like the value where he's at, and I think that if he maintains that same target share without a real wide receiver 1 on the team, yeah, you're looking at a guy who's easily a top 10 running back in fantasy.
Yeah.
But I keep that in the back of my head that there is an opportunity here where those rushing touchdowns might never come for James Cook, and those touches might go way down for James Cook if Ray Davis is a guy that they really want to utilize, like I think they will.
Yeah. Well, Ray Davis. I like that you started off uh, professing your affection for Davis,
Oh, I know it's
and
true.
not
I
just
know it's true. Not everyone loves him the way I do.
well, and that's I think that what's good about Davis loving like the fantasy football entity that he represents is like you said, um, there's opportunity in the new approach to this offense, and you can even think about like the peripheral, like the the table scraps that Murray and Harris and those guys would get at Buffalo. Like there is a running back 2 role, especially again with the vacuum that Diggs leaves, and then Davis. The Buffalo Bill. Let's do some helmet association. Like I think of Fred Jackson. You know,
Yep.
Fred Jackson wasn't the most physically overwhelming back, but he was just, he was a good all around back. He was very physical, like competitive toughness, and
By the way, fun
I think
fact,
that they're going
Fred
to love Ray
Jackson and Ray
Davis.
Davis are gonna be
Uh
wearing the
huh.
same number.
Oh, so that
They're
can't
both
be
they're both
accidental, right?
22.
Yeah, so that can't be. I mean, so anyway, Ray Davis. And look, we could live in a world where James Cook can be like a second, third round value as a fourth rounder, and Ray Davis can still be like a matchup flex, or if Cook misses time, Davis could be. And the reason it's easy to love Davis as the person or the story, Mayor of Narrative Street, that he represents, is just because he is that American dream football player. Both his parents were in prison, I believe. He lived like in the basement of the hospital in San Francisco for a couple of months. I think he was in the foster care system. Um,
Yep.
there's just the things he had to personally overcome to get to the place he has gotten to is unimaginable. So you want to root for that. You want to feel good if he's successful, and that's, I think, the fun part of the Ray Davis as a player, and putting him in Buffalo in a place where I think they embrace players like that.
Yeah, 100%. That's something that I've also tried to that story, I always wanted to give the context to people when everyone was complaining that Ray Davis is so old, being 24 years old. Well, he wasn't afforded the opportunity to finish high school with enough credits correctly, so he had to go to a school afterwards, and
Right.
he ended up starting college a little late. And there's the COVID years, and there's all these things that happen. It just
Right.
he was good as a young man, as a freshman. So the
Yeah.
context matters, the story matters, and listen, I'm right there with you, Mayor of Narrative Street. Like
Yeah.
I'm all in on that.
Yeah. No, it's um and the thing is, and I get it. Look, and there's lots of very smart people in our industry, very good people who make their living giving out 55-45 bets that will consistently hit at 55-45, and you stack up enough of those. I've said this on the show like once or twice or 3 times a year. I'll say this, and it works. That works in fantasy football. It absolutely works. But as you've just illustrated, like when you're looking at breakout age as a knockout factor or something like that in your evaluation for players, you're treating this very meaningful story, which actually could hold some of the clues. If Ray Davis is a hit in the NFL, there's a clue there in his life story, right? I think there was a clue in CJ Stroud's life story. I've brought this up many times. Like his dad was in prison. They lived above like a storage unit, he and his family. He didn't have private coaches when he was young. He didn't have like I mean, quarterbacks are engineered. Most NFL quarterbacks have been engineered from a very young age. CJ
Yep.
Stroud didn't have that. He had to prove himself, and he did, and he continues to.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing that with what? With Caleb, right? Caleb was engineered since birth almost. This
Right?
guy, it's so interesting to see the dichotomy of that, of how
Mhm.
different these players are. But I'll always just say, man, when we've seen guys overcome one thing, it's pretty likely they'll overcome the next
Sure,
thing, and those are the
sure.
kind of guys that are able to hit the ground running in the NFL.
Well, in quarterback in particular, I mean, confidence is an important part of every player's career and story, but quarterback in particular is a mental, emotional, spiritual position as much as it is a physical position. And you bring up Caleb Williams, and this is probably something that I'm going to talk about over and over again. I repeat myself a lot. Everyone's so kind. Y'all are so kind out there. But Caleb Williams really represents a new kind of NFL player, or a new experience leading up to a someone becoming a professional football player. And I've mentioned this on the show a few times already, but reading some of the anonymous scout comments, groan, anonymous scout, some of them really seem to boil down to he makes me uncomfortable. He makes me feel uncomfortable in some way, shape, or form, you know? And I think that there absolutely is something changing. There's, again, other things going on in our country we could talk about that fit this, where um, young people are not being, accepted, basically. And part of it is name, image, likeness, right? Or otherwise speaking up for yourself. uh it makes people uncomfortable, right?
Yep.
That Caleb Williams has been able to author, well, Caleb Williams in his camp, his father plays a role in this. They have been able to author his journey in a way that like, quarterbacks 10 years ago couldn't, right? They were still beholden more to the college and so on. But Caleb Williams is, but I'm rooting for him for sure. And if they win, it's not, they're going to love him in Chicago. It's not going to matter. Are you in on, I mean, Williams, I'm looking at quarterback, by the way, taking it back to fantasy football. And I was going to, you mentioned, by the way, you mentioned McBride and talked about him. And I do think Kyler Murray is really interesting. And I think the Arizona offense in general, as a rising tide raising all ships potential offense, is very
Yeah.
interesting, without a doubt. So there's a point in the draft. I feel like early quarterback strategy. Dak, Dak is still going like quarterback 8, huh? I mean, everyone's in on CD Lamb as the number
Yeah.
one wide receiver. So why aren't we treating Dak as second half of the year Dak? Because we're treating CD as second half of the year CD, but Dak Prescott in second half of the year was better than quarterback 8. I know that. That's pretty. I think that's a slam dunk. Kyler, I mean, he was supposed to be a top 5 fantasy quarterback before he got hurt. Now it seems like everything's in place for him. We're in on Marvin Harrison in the early second round as a community. Well, that's going to help Kyle. If he has the 4th round tight end and an early second round wide receiver, Kyler Murray's going to be better than quarterback 8 or wherever he is.
Well, and Sig, you go back and you look at when Kyler wasn't injured,
Mm-hmm.
and in these previous years and his points per game, quarterback 6, quarterback 3, quarterback 5, and we're able to draft him around quarterback 8 or 9 right now in drafts. I mean, it's just we have a very, very obvious discount in front of us where we're getting a guy 4 spots later than we should at his respective position, maybe even 2 rounds later than we should.
Yeah, I mean, it makes quarterback a little bit easier. Um, and even Jordan Love. I mean, I think there's a strong argument. Jordan Love's
Yeah.
quarterback 10. And if you look at what he did in the second half of the year, he had a slump in the first half, like in October. But after that, and this is an ascendant offense, so it's easy to say like whichever one of the three, let your league decide. But then even now, does Caleb Williams belong in this conversation? Is he one that could potentially, because he's the next one up after this group? Is how big is the drop off to him?
I don't know that I'm ready to put him in that group just yet. And not it's weird because I don't even know how to contextualize this, because this is not a knock against his talent, nor is it a knock against the weapons around him. And normally that's the easy, escape hatch you can use on a player like this as to why you're not ready to rank them with the rest. It's just it is so tough to rank a rookie that high and kind of put your eggs in that basket. But I guess the good thing about where he's being drafted is that this is a guy that probably in your home leagues and even in best ball, he's going to go around that quarterback 12 to 15 or 16 range. And you don't have to spend a high pick on him. And typically, I wouldn't be doing this. I wouldn't go and draft two quarterbacks, but you can. You can pair Jayden Daniels and Caleb Williams together. You can get a Brock Purdy and a Caleb Williams together, and it's you get a little buddy system going on
Uh
there.
huh.
I do think if I had to prefer one quarterback or the other, this is not for NFL purposes. For NFL purposes, it's Caleb. But if I had to prefer one for fantasy right now in terms of those rookies, I'd probably lean Jayden Daniels just because of that rushing upside. He's also got great weapons around him. Cliff Kingsbury, has been able to put a good offense with a rookie quarterback, just like Kyler he did a few years ago. So I don't think that Caleb is going to be bad for fantasy, but I don't want us to get a little too over our skis where we say, well, Caleb Williams is supposed to be a better prospect than CJ Stroud, right? We saw how good CJ Stroud was last year, and he did it with very little, at the time, or perceived very little. And Caleb has all these great weapons, so he should hit the ground running, right? I don't know that I'm willing to make that bet. I don't know that I'm willing to invest that in my quarterback spot. But if there was a year that I'm willing and able to do that, it's this year, because quarterback, I mean, looking at it now, it just goes so deep. You've
Right.
you've
Right.
got 20, 23 quarterbacks that I'm comfortable drafting. So I'm willing to let everyone else in my league draft them and see where I can find some values on guys.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, that's the thing about quarterback. The psychology about quarterback during a draft is if there's even a player close in value, you kick quarterback down the road another round or two because you're still going
Yeah.
to be okay. And even I think Jared Goff is like quarterback 17 on the Jared Goff new contract extension day or week.
Well, he's up to
Uh,
16 now.
yeah, 16. But indoor Jared Goff is like a mid quarterback one, depending on your
Yeah.
scoring system. So you just take Jared Goff and go like throw some stuff against the wall, see what sticks for those other weeks. You can even make that happen. Okay. We do have like a little bit of housekeeping, you know, um, because uh and people know Alfredo for his wonderful takes and personality and his hair, but also he's been helping us do like a ton of stuff helping the health of football guys. I mean, we're trying to do, as long as the company is healthy, then we're going to continue to just be us. And I think that's why y'all are here. It's because we just get to be us and we want to just be us. And like helping this YouTube thing grow, which is what you've done to a massive degree behind the scenes, Alfredo, is like good for football guys. And it's easy way to like support the company. Like, even if you don't want to subscribe, we have split the YouTube channels, right? So if you're watching this right now, this is like the football guys channel, but now you and Dave Kluge are on a different channel, and then we have a third channel too, and I'll let you talk about that. But really, what I want to talk about is because it's about relationships, like we've been talking about. It's about
Yep.
relationships, and the Audible has been a show about football, about fantasy football, but it's also been about the relationship between Cecil and I. And it's 20 years, and sleeping on the road, uh in like moldy wall La Quintas or something like that, and on the all-star road trips, and there's lots of bonding there. There's a lot. There's we've been to each other's homes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But what tell me at this point, because I think I was the first guest. Was I one of the first guests? I don't want to self-aggrandize
Yeah. No, you
when you
were.
guys
You were the
um
first guest.
and yeah, and y'all, you were just starting your voyage. Um, Tell me about the Alfredo Dave relationship, where we are today on May 15th.
The Alfredo Dave relationship is that of an old married couple already. We agree on many things, but we are in no shortage of disagreements, respectful disagreements.
Uh-huh.
We have learned to work together. We have learned each
Mhm.
other's differences. Dave is very much a creature of habit, and he likes to have his routine and his schedule. And I try to be as fluid as possible in terms of like how we can change things, even if we have to change it last
Mhm.
minute, which
Mhm.
is probably not what you would have guessed, Sig, from all of our
Uh,
interactions of like how
uh-huh.
YouTube and content needs to be run, because I'm always trying to plan. But it's just those little things that you learn about each other and the ebbs and flows of content and being able just to converse with one another and opinions and stuff like that. And Dave is a little more data driven than I, whereas I have my background in scouting, and that's where I can just try to look at a player and say, okay, yes, this is like a Ray Davis, right? I know he's a
Mhm.
little bit older, but I really love the film, and so there's all these little things that we've kind of learned to work with each other really well, and we've cultivated just a really nice relationship with our audience members. We had our
Mhm.
listener league where people were super stoked about that, and it kind of just led me to this thing where I was sitting there with Joe, and I was saying, Joe, it's something that it's just been kind of weighing on me. Is I feel like we have people. It's almost like you have a bunch of vegans and you keep trying to feed them steak, and it's just like, well, that's not their relationship. That's not what they want. We have a relationship with our audience, and then Sig and Cecil, you guys have your relationship with your audience, and there's plenty of crossover in that Venn diagram, right? But
Mhm.
I've always been a big believer that people make relationships with other people. As much as they love brands, they make relationships with people. We're seeing that now with like the Marvel films. Nobody cared about Marvel films and Iron Man until all of a sudden Robert Downey Jr. showed up. They made a relationship with that person. Yeah, I mean, it's just so true. And that's been something that we talked about, we met about multiple times, and we decided, let's put these shows and this content all into different channels, because there's going to be someone that's looking for dynasty content that isn't looking for me and Dave, and there's going to be someone that's looking for me and Dave that's maybe not looking for the audible. And let's make this as easy as possible for the football guys family, all the people that have
Mhm.
supported us for years, to make sure they can get exactly what they want, and that's what we've been able to do.
Yeah. So, I mean, look, the wonderful thing was just that the warm familiarity and affection that you were talking about, the growth of your relationship with Dave, and the word love comes up. We love each other, work husbands,
We do.
whatever. You talk about like a marriage. You said married couple, Cecil and I.
Yep.
I mean, some of it's because we see each other not just when we see each other and talk to each other in the context of the shows, but before the shows and after the shows, and sometimes whatever one of us is having off day or grouchy or whatever. Uh, and then you see that same person through the lens of the show, but you feel different things maybe than the audience does, because it's about that the energy that's passing back and forth, and it's forged out of football guys. The relationship and the show. I feel like it's like True Detective, really, Alfredo. Like we're just doing
Yes.
we're doing another. You're like
Yes.
the next season of the True Detective, right? Like it's about me and Cecil. Now it's about you and Dave, but it's about fantasy football analysts. But no, really, it's about like the humanity. I feel like that's the most. I wanted to start the revolution. I wanted to be the play-by-play announcer for the Pirates. I wanted to start the revolution, and I do think part of how we can start the revolution, because obviously fantasy football is pretty far from starting the revolution, but I feel like the revolution now is about just staying human, just acknowledging the humanity in each other, and continuing to act from a human place, your soul, your spirit, living like you have one and that it matters. And however that means something to you. And I think that is one of the little glimmers that is always in football guys, is that we're actual people just talking about football and thinking about football the way actual people do. Uh, and that's what's on these shows. So yeah, subscribe to the channels, give it a chance, and feel like that's great. If not, whatever. No one can be everything to everybody, but we're going to be what we are. We're going to continue to be what we are at Football Guys. Okay. And now I have to have Dave on and ask Dave, tell me about the relationship. Talk about True on the Couch. Actually, I'm going to bring Dave in right now. Dave, no, I'm just kidding. Anyway, this was something we're off the rails. We already were off the rails, but now
That's
we're
fine.
really off the rails. But also before we went live, Alfredo, you and I were talking about, like, I live in Southeast Louisiana, I live in New Orleans, you live in South Florida, and you're like of South Florida. Also, I'm not of New Orleans, but I'm becoming that way. Anyway, like, weather, climate change,
Oof.
it's all very real for us. And there's a sense of like impending instability at any moment. But yet, at least I can tell you in New Orleans, I could wax rhapsodic for the next 5 hours. I'll do it if you dare me, about why I love living here and why I will gladly suffer that. Don't The thunderbolt shouldn't come out of the sky right now. To get to live the way people live here and experience this. I just joined the New Orleans Athletic Club. I know you ran a boxing gym. I just joined the New Orleans Athletic Club. It was enchanting. I could probably have to go for an hour about the New Orleans Athletic Club alone. But tell me about South Florida. What do you love? What makes it worth suffering that instability in South Florida?
So, I mean, you say I'm of South Florida, and absolutely. I was born in Miami. I live in Broward County, which is, I'm about 40 minutes away from Miami. But my mom is, she was born in Cuba. This was where
Mhm.
she came. This is where our family settled down with roots. And um, it's always so incredible to me. I went to college down in Miami, and I got to learn about the city a bit more and experience it. Not the stuff that you read about, but like actually experience it. And
Mhm.
um, man, I gotta say, like, just one of the coolest experiences was going to Little Havana and just being able to walk the streets there and have my mom tell me of all the places that she used to go. And oh, is that still there? Like, no, it's a convenience store now. And then she'd be like, well, what about this? And like, oh, I went to a restaurant here, and she'd be like, oh, that used to be this other restaurant. It was so
Mhm.
good. And there's something really incredible that I don't think enough people get to experience, which is just being able to connect with whatever your heritage was.
Mhm.
And I never want to get to a point where I don't do that or I don't acknowledge it. I'm already the black sheep, or in this case the white sheep of the family, where I have the lightest complexion. I do
Mhm.
not speak as good as Spanish as everyone else in the family,
Mhm.
and I never ever want to get to that point where I don't connect with my heritage as well as I do. And so it's been, I don't know that I could ever even move from here. And even being married to my wife, who is half Guatemalan, half Colombian, all of her family is down here as well. There
Mhm.
is so much beautiful Latino influence on our families that it's one of those weird things where most Latin families don't move away from each other. I remember I talked about it
Mhm.
once. I talked about
Mhm.
potentially moving to Colorado, and my mom just started crying, and she's like,
Mhm.
"So, why do you hate me? Is that what you don't want
Mhm.
me to? You don't want me to be
Mhm.
around?"
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
it's I don't say that, by the way. I love you, mom. I don't say that to poke fun or to
No, no.
to
It's
throw a
real.
blanket over family situations, but it's just one of those things that when Latin families get here, they
Mhm.
all live together,
Mhm.
and it becomes that support system that you get so used to. And I love that my mom is 20 minutes away and my aunt is 15 minutes away, and
Mhm.
I've got
Mhm.
relatives an hour away. Everyone is just so close, and it's so beautiful. And it's the experience of having rich heritage and continued family heritage that not many people get. And um I just it's so hard to put into words, and I know I'm probably
Mhm.
struggling to do this, but I love it, and there's a sense of comfort that not everyone gets. And I know so many people have told me, "Oh, just move. It's hot. You don't
Mhm.
like it? Move." And it's not that simple. It's just
Yeah.
not.
Oh, but I just love too, for you, it's like family, right? Familia. Um, and you touch on a lot of stuff. I mean, I feel like we should just go another hour and just go on Miami, because the few times I've been to Miami, what I really love about Miami, and I think it's similar to New Orleans, in that, like, New Orleans is a Caribbean city. Miami is
Mhm.
a city. Miami belongs to like South America as much as it belongs to North America. You know,
Yes.
in the Caribbean. It's part of the ecosystem, the bloodstream of the world, not just the United States, not just Florida. It's part of stuff much bigger than those places. And because of that, you have all of these ethnic enclaves, like some traces of some authentic culture. Wow,
Mhm.
culture. And from culture comes strength. From culture comes like knowing yourself, participating in culture, and the intersection of so many things. Like when I was in Miami, it felt a little bit like Rio. Not that I've been to all these places, but like Havana or Kingston, or it's like all the, like, you feel, you sense, you get like the scent of like different places all there because the people have brought that there. Like you say, the families, there's ancestor worship. I could go off on a whole trip about ancestor worship, but family. And I say this because, and I think that, again, God, there's so many things going on. Like the elephant in the room is all these different things going on that we never talk about because, hey, fantasy football is like shelter from all that. But, there's hard feelings in our country right now about your roots and all that. And I
Mhm.
think the answer is like we celebrate everybody's roots and ancestors. We learn from the past and we say things that happened in the past should not be reproduced, and those things were wrong. And we know the difference between right and wrong. We can still celebrate. But the thing is, it isn't like any one past. We celebrate all the pasts. All of them are worth celebrating. All of them have things for us to learn and grow from. Culture, culture it used to be everywhere. And with family, it's family is culture. uh you it's so hard, Alfredo, in 2024 America. It's hard to go it out there in any way, shape, or form, but especially if you're going it alone or going it as like the suburban nuclear family. The breaking up of the extended family model is one of the worst things that hurt us. It isolated us as people. Like, we're social beings, like we have all this stuff. Again, I'm talking about as like a computer, like hardware, software, that about being social. And when you're in your family, and you're not, you don't even conceive of yourself as an individual. You're part of a different kind of organism. You're part of this family. That's why your mom was like broke. Like, I don't understand, like, but you're part of this family. Why would you want to leave this family? There is no you without this family. Like, and that's why ancestor worship is important too, because there's no you without your ancestors either. And everything that entails. So the last thing I want to end on, because you brought up your mom, it
Yes,
was
sir.
Mother's Day. It was Mother's Day. I,
Mhm.
I I lost my mom in 2012, but I know that if you like this show and you like me, or you are at least okay with spending time with me, then you must like my mom. My mom was a wonderful person. I could talk about lots of layers there, but I know you, when we recorded stuff at Football Guys for Mother's Day, you said after you had been take something private, making public, Alfredo, that
It's
you got
fine.
emotional. You got emotional after you
Yeah.
recorded with your mom, because it was this neat thing where it was like, "Hey, mom, tell me what my job is," which is really funny. I wish I could have done that with my mom. It would have been funny. She would have been like, "Siggy, I don't know, but it makes you happy in football." And I remember when you've watched the Steelers. She would have loved it. She would have just loved it. She would have lit up. It's great that when your mom lights up when she talks about you, and I know your mom does. But you said it made it emotional. Why did it make you emotional?
You got me already tearing up a little bit right now. My relationship with my mom is so special. She was a single mother. She raised me, on her own, worked her I'll say butt
Hmm.
off. Sorry, Joe.
Sorry, Joe.
Yeah, yeah. To make sure that I had every single opportunity in life and every advantage. And I wrote about this when we did, our little excerpts about our mothers and in the Football Guys. I guess the Mother's Day wishes out there that we wrote, and I would not be who I am without her. And I think that's true for all of
Sure.
us, that we wouldn't be who we are without our parents, for good or bad. And I think for her, the thing that I loved and how it related to fantasy football and sports and all that in general was she taught me from an early age that the culture of either playing or watching or just being around it. It was so incredible to be. It's this interesting thing where sports is almost a magnified view of the world, where you're in
Hmm.
a little bit smaller arena there, where you're part of something that you can't quite control, and that's exactly how the world is. And there's this culture shock of having a bunch of people who all agree with you and root for that same team, and they're all happy
Right.
when you're happy, they're sad when you're sad, and there was just so many lessons that I learned from sports that came from my mom, and I would get mad and cry and throw things if the Heat would lose or the Dolphins would
Sure.
lose. And she'd be like, "Well, why are you so upset?" And I was like, "Well, they lost." And she's like, "They're going to play again next week. It's okay."
Right.
You
Right.
have to learn how to overcome these things. And man, it's just, I could go on forever with the
Oh, it's
amount
a
of things
great
that she
picture.
taught me,
Yeah.
but she made me strong. as an individual. And I think that speaks so much to who she was, being a single mother and being strong, coming from another country, learning a new language, and being able to provide for someone. Gosh, if I can be half of that as a parent, I will have done a good job.
Yeah. Well, this is good. And to all the moms, again, happy Mother's Day. Did a Cajun brunch, did a dance lesson, follow and lead. That's me, me and Cecil. You and who's the lead, who's the follow. That's how you do it, folks. We follow you. You're the lead at Football Guys. We love you, and you're so classy.